This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Friday, May 26, 2023. Thank you for joining us here on thetruthcentral.com. We are doing a podcast every weekday. Let's go. First of all, I want to show you the new book is out. So there we are. It's the coming global crash will create a historic gold rush. I'm co-authored this with Dean Heskin. Dean is the chairman and CEO of Swiss America. Swiss America is one of our sponsors. It's the book is about, let's see how many pages it is. A couple hundred pages. And it is really showing the trend. The basic theme of the book is that the crashes that we've gone through, the economic downturns of going through in the 1970s and again in 2007, 2008, and with the pandemic, have all been opportunities for gold to double in price and hit new highs. I mean, gold is in the 70s and in the 2008 doubled. It hit its all-time high of $2,074 during the pandemic. There it is on our website under books. And if you click there, you can go to Amazon. It's available both in a paperback edition and a Kindle. So you can get it both ways. And I think it's going to do extremely well. We're covering economics very strongly on this show. I think we're going to see a major crash. It looks like they'll get a debt ceiling agreement, like I've been saying, predicting that last minute we'll get a kabuki dance and it'll accomplish nothing. They'll raise the debt ceiling so we can spend more trillions of dollars that we don't have. And they'll say, well, we've got a 0.02 or 0.2% reduction of the spending. It'll be nothing. Let's get right into the news I want to cover today. The first story, quite a bit about how these democratic cities are doing, which is not particularly well. I mean, these are getting to be called democratic hellholes, and there's good reason for it. This is one on San Francisco. San Francisco is increasingly plagued by human feces all over the place. The downtown area, San Francisco used to have one of the prettiest, most active downtowns. Before the pandemic, the offices were about 100% occupied. And right now, the filth in the streets is getting to be a real problem. So that you've got, this is pretty disgusting, but feces includes bags filled with feces that are not inside trash receptacles. Feces are smeared on the street, sidewalk, on other objects. I mean, this is just disgusting. And a large number of the neighborhoods in the whole downtown area is really infested by this homeless problem. So the California's commercial and residential streets are also tagged up with the neighborhoods are also getting graffiti, and downtown is getting high levels of graffiti, not only feces, but graffiti, which is worse than the commercial areas. And you're seeing, in terms of actual graffiti, basically, they're about 10 times more incidences of graffiti, 160,000 reported in the key commercial areas in comparison to the citywide sample, which is 16,000. So the downtown area is getting a staggering amount of graffiti, filth, homelessness. It's not safe, and businesses are moving out. So the next point I want to cover, another article here, is that a staggering 30% of San Francisco office space is vacant. Well, of course, I mean, Salesforce, which has been a giant company, put the last of its San Francisco office space up for sublease, part of a January plan to lay off 7,000 employees and reduce office space. I mean, that's both the layoffs, the pandemic shift to working at home, the filth in the downtown area and the reluctance of people to go downtown. These are dying downtown areas. And what's going to happen is when the buildings need to be refinanced, which they will need to be done, or landlords facing bankruptcy problems because they're not getting the revenue from the occupancy rates that they've been anticipating, you're going to find this leads to a commercial real estate crisis, which will hit the banks. When it hits the banks will have to mark down their loans, mark them to market. They'll be worth less, or they'll be non-performing, and basically write-offs. The banks will take huge losses, and that will hurt the bank's asset position and make, again, another wave of probably regional and community banks go insolvent. We're not finished with the bank crisis. And by the way, we're going to be also possibly dealing with another rate increase from the Federal Reserve. That's going to be yet decided. But I'd be surprised if the Fed just surrenders that they can't handle inflation that's out of control, which it appears to be the case. At any rate, what we're seeing is that the Salesforce office, for instance, at 350 Mission Street, the top floors, and the fifth and sixth floors, which encompass more than 104,000 square feet, are now up for sublease. Salesforce's intention to cut back on its real estate footprint in San Francisco has been going on since January. And San Francisco's largest private employer, which has been Salesforce, has listed half of its Salesforce West at Fremont, 350 Fremont space, for sublease, and 6 floors at Salesforce Tower. So you're seeing a massive, massive change. The tech industry is also laying off. The businesses are challenged with macroeconomic headwinds, inflation, tech industry layoffs, rising interest rates, banking industry uncertainty, recession, and risk of recession. That's why I'm saying the book I've just written with Dean Heskin here on the global crash, this is going to be a global crash. I think it's unavoidable at this point. I don't see any way that we'll be able to avoid it. Chris, would you like to have a comment?
It's really bad. I don't think this is what Petula Clark meant when she said, come visit downtown, and it's the place where you want to go, and where the lights are low and everything else like that. I think Petula had a slightly different vision in mind.
She had a vision in mind when the cities were safe, when they were civilized. We didn't have this Marxist Democratic Party in charge. It's destructive. We're self-destructing America is what we're doing, and it's suicidal. Now, the next one I want to cover, let's go to the Chicago self-destruction plan. This is pretty surprising. This is a Wall Street Journal editorial by the editorial board. And they're saying, well, it didn't take that long. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson was inaugurated last week, and 2 days later, his allies released a report with their agenda for the next 4 years, titled, First We Get the Money. They mean your money. The report offers a flavor of the trend in Chicago politics and why the once great city is struggling. The report says a mere $12 billion in new spending will, quote, make Chicago truly safe by, quote, addressing issues that underlie crime and poverty. So to get the cash, the mayor would collect $6.8 billion by making, quote, the wealthy and corporations pay what they owe, and then cut spending on the Chicago Police Department. I mean, this is insane. Mr. Johnson's trying to distance himself from the report, but its creators, the Action Center on Race and Economy, ACRE, and the People's Unity Platform, if those aren't communist organizations, socialist organizations, I don't know what is, they helped the mayor win. And the co-author of the report, this Sagib Bhatti, is on his transition team. Chicago Teachers Union President Stacey Davis Gates is on the ACRE board. So the report suggests that he have a head tax. Johnson should put a head tax on businesses, $33 per employee. The previous $4 per employee head tax was ended in 2014 by Mayor Rahm Emanuel at that time, called it a job killer and a detriment to business hiring. They want to raise rates on the real estate transfer tax. They want to, landlords with luxury apartments that are vacant should pay a fee to encourage them to charge more affordable rents. The authors, the report, want to raise the tax on jet fuel to force airlines to pay for profiting from creating pollution in our city. The authors also want Illinois to change the state law to allow a tax on financial and business assets of the 10% wealthiest Chicagoans. Who's going to stay in Chicago? So again, it ends this way. The editorial of the Wall Street Journal ends like this. As for the CPD, Chicago Police Department, the mayor, quote, should eliminate 1,000 vacant police positions. 1,000 vacant, eliminate them, police positions, and commit to cutting the police department budget before cutting other services. If Mr. Johnson, quote, continues to slash the policing budget by 9% in each of the next 4 years, the report writes this would free up $538 million per year by 2027. Editorial ends, that's assuming anyone still lives in Chicago. The city lost 81,000 people from mid-2020 to mid-2022. According to the latest census numbers, the mayor's pals say, quote, the city budget's a moral document. Readers can decide what kind of morality lets criminal gangs run wild while shrinking the police force and chasing taxpayers out of the city. That's the Wall Street Journal editorial. Chris, what do you think?
Again, when Petula Clark said downtown wasn't this wasn't what she had in mind, I do note that Paper Lace was actually incorrect when they were describing the night Chicago died as when Al Capone tried to war with the police. Apparently, the night Chicago died was when Lori Lightfoot was elected mayor, and then it got worse when. How do you think it was going to get worse than Lori Lightfoot?
We don't need no stinking police.
Head tax, though. How discouraging to finance, business, and the ultimate thing they really want, taxation. Is it to tax employers to hire people, or tax employers for the number of employees they have? Not all of them, but many of them. It's asking for less workers. It's asking for less efficiency. And it's asking for
for a global economic crash is what it's asking for.
That's true.
And we're going to have it. And it's in the works. It won't be apparent for a while, but we've still got high inflation. We've got taxes. We're spending like crazy on the federal budget. The inflation won't stop as long as we're spending trillions we don't have. And the amount of credit, that's what this book documents, the amount of credit outstanding worldwide has never been this high. And credit is going to crash, and the banks will crash with it. This is an engineered deconstruction of capitalism and basically Western civilization. Now, I'm going to turn to several stories here next about what Russia's doing and the Middle East largely, but in general, Eastern Europe and the Middle East. This first story, a Russian bank governor has visited Iran to strengthen financial ties. Iran and Russia are getting close together. Iran is letting Russia use Iranian drones in the war in Ukraine. That's extremely dangerous because Iran is going forward with developing their own nuclear weapons. And I've said when Iran is secure that it's got an arsenal of nuclear weapons, they will use them against Iran. Against Israel. I've been writing 3 books on Iran, trying to prevent this. My first was about 2006, Atomic Iran. And again, I have not been able to stop it. Largely, you've seen John Kerry in the middle of this. The American left seems to want to give Iran nuclear weapons and does not support Israel. I think that's a sure suicidal formula, and it's clearly anti-biblical. What the Bible predicts, I believe, is that in Ezekiel that there will be a nuclear war and that Iran and Israel will be at it, and that in the end God wins because God intervenes. That's you could take a look at the passages in Ezekiel. My books discuss it at length. And in Iran, you've got the Shiites who believe that the family of the Prophet Muhammad should be the ruler of Islam. There's a Mahdi who was the one part of the family of the Prophet who went down the well and into hiding hundreds of years ago. And they believe that when the Mahdi comes out of the well, there will be a worldwide apocalypse and Shiite Islam will triumph over all religions in the world. This is the actual core of the Shiite religious faith. I remember when Ahmadinejad, their former prime minister, was in Washington and New York. He spoke at the United Nations and he was talking about the Mahdi. I was there covering it for WorldNet Daily at the time at the United Nations. At any rate, what this Russian bank governor is doing is they're firming up ties with Iran. She also participated in talks during the Asian Clearing Union meeting in Tehran, which is in Iran, which Russia is attending as an observer along with officials from Belarus and Afghanistan. According to Iran's semi-official news agency, Tasnim, Iran's first vice president, Mohammad Mokhber, discussed efforts with this Russian banker to eliminate the use of the dollar in transactions with Russia. So they're all joining together. Now we're finding that this is going to be, I believe, the first week in June, Iran will probably join the BRICS nation. The BRICS nations are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. South Africa, by the way, is also in chaos and in complete destabilization. I think South Africa is close to being a failed state. At any rate, the idea here with Russia is to expand the use of the ruble, Russia's currency, in international trade. And China is wanting to expand the use of its currency, the renminbi, or the yuan, called both names, which is Chinese currency in world trade. Ultimately, I think they'll develop a BRICS currency, and it would not surprise me to see it become a gold-backed currency. I think the world is beginning to realize that what we've been doing is, again, suicidal with fiat currencies. In 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. Now, this next story I think is also important because this is from the Mises Institute, MISES, which I follow. It's a very conservative economic organization, but I think their economics are right on. I tend to agree largely with what they say. Let me cover this. Thanks to our sanctions, U.S. sanctions, we're losing our grip in the Middle East. So this article basically says it's written by Ryan McMacken, who is a member of the Mises Institute. He's the executive editor at the Mises Institute. And what he is saying is that the Arab League has basically welcomed the Syrian regime back to the organization. Representatives from several Arab member states took Assad's hand. Remember, he was the one who was being so tremendously under attack when when we were in Afghanistan and Iran was destabilizing Syria. Assad was also destabilizing the whole region, and you had the rise of ISIS, which traces back largely to Syria. At any rate, we're isolating ourselves with our policy, which remains opposed to Assad. And you've got now this Arab League, which is engaging in a rapprochement, which means coming together with a kind of a reforming strong relations with Assad. And it's a repudiation of U.S. policy. This Arab League's members, which include Saudi Arabia and Egypt, are going along with this, welcoming Assad and Syria back into their union. Washington basically has sought to isolate and to sanction Syria and even Saudi Arabia and Iran. What it's done is backfired against us. Both Beijing and Saudi Arabia have increased their ties with Russia. So you've got China, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and they're coming together, largely because our policies in the Biden administration have been completely destructive of what Donald Trump had built. If you'll remember, Donald Trump was getting the Arab states to all accept Israel and to lay down their hostility to Israel. Now, joining with Iran, that's been reversed. So Saudi Arabia is also increasing its ties with Iran and Syria, which is remarkable because Saudi Arabia is Sunni. The ages-long fight in the Middle East has been the Shiites, who believe on this Mahdi, and the Sunni, who believe the rulership of Islam should be secular, like the Ottoman Empire was before World War I. And that the Sunnis and the Shiites are getting together only is because the United States has withdrawn from the region in any meaningful way. So Washington has imposed harsh sanctions, including, and Donald Trump was doing maximum pressure to cripple Iran. And again, I've said from the beginning that the Iranian people are not with the mullahs who control and repress any dissent. You saw recently another wave of popular uprising against the regime, the mullahs, the ruling clerics. And going back to Obama, I remember being in Obama's first years in office, 2008, 2009, 2009 when he was in office, and 2010, being in Israel and trying to warn the top leadership in Israel that Obama was not going to support Israel. And Obama was very reluctant to support Israel. It was a shock to them in Israel that they did not have American support, which they've been counting on since 1948, when the State of Israel was created. So this maximum pressure is only pushing the Saudis, Syria, Iran closer to Moscow. And with the U.S. continuing to inflict these harsh sanctions on the Russian regime, anything that helps Damascus, which is Syria, and Tehran, which is Iran, has the potential to help Moscow as well. Both the Saudis and Chinese have shown growing efforts to forge ties directly with the Russian regime as well. The Chinese-Russian summit in February 2022, both regimes stated they plan to forge even closer ties. Not changed after a year of heightened hostilities from the U.S. and NATO aimed at Moscow. It's likely that the Russia-China relations are closer than they've ever been in the post-Soviet era. You'll remember that Russia and China were, for a long while, at odds. So, again, the whole idea of the axis of evil, which George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush were articulating, which focused on Iran, now you're finding that Iran has got some very powerful partners, and that you're seeing the OPEC nations, which is dominated by Saudi Arabia, has shown no interest in helping the U.S. with sanctions against Russia. In fact, I think that through the BRICS, you're going to have, again, Iran being an active member of this whole Middle Eastern oil-producing region, and Iran will continue to derive substantial revenue from oil, while the United States and Europe are committing self-destruction with this ridiculous demonizing of carbon dioxide, which we exhale. They're like trying to demonize. It's almost like a death cult. We're our own enemy. In fact, they call the Anthropocene the last epoch of human history on Earth, in which we will destroy ourselves by using hydrocarbon fuels. This is sure idiocy. Hydrocarbon fuels are a natural product of the Earth. They're abiotic. I've written about this extensively in the book on Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. I'm writing extensively these days, trying as hard as I can to beat this age of disinformation. It's very hard because there's a strong grip on our institutions, on the press, our universities, on the bureaucracy. And by the way, I just saw this morning that the Supreme Court, a 9-0 decision, has reversed the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, which has wanted to declare it has control over all water in the United States. And there's a lawsuit, I believe the Gateway Pundit's involved in. Jim Hoff, the head of the Gateway Pundit, I believe, is the chief plaintiff now, arguing that the Biden administration wants to say that our cognitive content, what we think, is part of the cognitive infrastructure of America, and it belongs to the government. So now the government is even asserting a legal right to control what we think. Again, if this is not totalitarianism and insanity, I don't know what is. Now, the next story here about Russia and Belarus. Russia is now going to start moving tactical nuclear weapons into Belarus. And Belarus is situated very prominently there by Poland. It's part of the Eastern European countries that Russia controls. And again, we have tactical nukes and have had them for a long time in Turkey. It's been a major issue for NATO. But with a deal with Russia to formally deploy Russian tactical nukes on Belarusian soil, it's essentially, as the Ukraine does these cross-border sabotage attacks on Russia, have escalated. As I pointed out before in this podcast, Zelensky's thought he can now go into Russia and do these sabotage attacks. He's destroying Russian oil depots, etc. This war is expanding, and I think there's absolutely zero chance that Ukraine is going to win this. Certainly, if we didn't have a proxy war with us and NATO supplying weapons and money to Ukraine, Ukraine would fall almost instantly. So, a report, the U.S. government thinks Russia has about 2,000 tactical nuclear weapons, which include bombs that can be carried by aircraft, warheads for short-range missiles, and artillery rounds. But again, if Moscow starts putting tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus and in general looking to do it all through Eastern Europe in the Russian-controlled states, which now I think are going to include part of Ukraine, Donbass, the eastern part of Ukraine. I don't see that going back to Ukrainian control. We're headed for a showdown between NATO and Russia, the United States and Russia, which could easily turn to a nuclear war. We've got potential of nuclear war now both in Iran and the Middle East and developing rapidly in Europe. Chris, your comments?
And Lukashenko, here's a guy who, for about a year, was talking tough, saying, "Oh, Russia's not going to be putting arms and bombs and nuclear weapons in my country, not in my borders." All of a sudden, a little before the Ukraine invasion, he does the quick 180 and allows all this to happen. It continues. He's like the guy in the movies who would talk tough and say, "I'm going to go get those guys there. I'm going to get them fighting words in my town." And the big guy looks at him and says, "All right, then let's fight." And he goes, "Well, we're not in my town."
Yeah, well, it's also, I think the Belarus knows that Russia's going to do what Russia wants. And you're right. It's Russia's town. Russia is the power. And what the left forgets in this whole, I think the left went insane when the Berlin Wall came down and Russia renounced communism. The left decided they were going to go after Russia and they're going to use NATO to attack Russia because it was no longer renounced communism. Now, I'd spent time in Poland after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and they may have renounced communism, but they are still very much socialist countries. They still think socialistically. I was working with some of the banks to try to introduce some Western banking ideas to develop Poland, and it was largely unsuccessful. The corruption, the inbred socialist mentality is a negative mentality. It destroys economic growth. And we're seeing that occur in the United States now. If our cities, who's going to live in these cities? You pay enormous rents to go into a city like New York or Boston or Chicago. You're you're supposed to have all the enjoyment of a city where you have theater, you've got museums, you've got music, you've got arts, you've got sports, you've got parks, etc. But if you're going to be overwhelmed by criminal gangs and criminals running the streets and police not being available because they're all quitting, they're afraid to arrest anyone, although themselves, or basically if they have an encounter with a minority and the minority dies in the encounter, they're probably going to go to prison for manslaughter or murder. I mean, look at this guy, the ex-Marine who put a stranglehold on someone in a subway car who was threatening to kill people. Now he's going to be charged with manslaughter. I mean, this is completely insanity. It's the kind of insanity that George Soros has funded for years. This Open Society Foundation, this defund the police. We're going to have, mediators. We're going to have conflict resolution mediators instead of the police. Yeah, well, that's not going to work. I mean,
never trust a guy never trust a guy who not only helped the Nazis, but said in an interview he doesn't regret doing so.
George Soros.
Yes, Soros.
Yeah, and it's a Jew who turned against Jews during World War II and worked with the Nazis to find Jews in hiding. They're proud of it. These people are evil. I think every demon in Satan's hell has been released on earth to cause havoc everywhere I look. And you see now Target, now you have North Face was also putting in pride gear for children and proclaiming, well, I mean, between Budweiser, Target, and North Face, doesn't anybody in corporate America get it? American people are
Budweiser made a big mistake. I get that. But they didn't market to children. You're saying North Face is marketing to children. That's
well, I think
an issue.
I'm not. I saw the gear was for women. I'm not. They're doing this rainbow gear. I mean, I saw a pretty disgusting clip of a guy who went into Target to try one of these rainbow swimsuits, transgender, and with a special tuck to make sure his genitals didn't pop out. I mean, that was pretty ridiculous.
They have that's where Target got in some trouble with children's clothing that did that sort of thing. The idea is it's okay if you're a company and a marketer to try to include other people, a market, if you will, people to come in and spend money there. I get that. On the other hand, if you're trying to market this kind of thing to children whose parents make such decisions for them, that's something that the people are speaking up about right now. Again, the market's telling them, don't do this.
Well, this is godless. This is, we don't need God. We can do our own things. We're God. Anybody who wants it, you got to respect transgenders. Well, I mean, in previous years, and the next book I have coming out with this Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, says basically that the left is now universalizing schizophrenia. Any mental disease someone has about who they are, it has to be universally accepted. That's the book right there. It'll be out in November. I'm writing extensively right now just to get as much out as I can. In the time I have left, I want to get as much truth on the record. Even if it's not read now, it will be read maybe someday in the future. It's upon my soul to write this stuff, and I'm writing it. And if you also take a look at our sponsors, please also, in addition to the supporting Swiss America and filling out its form with this Walking Liberty $50, take a look at Matt McMillan's agency. Matt's doing annuities, and he's doing annuities and universal life that are indexed. They have high yields right now. Whenever interest rates are high, these life products are extremely valuable because they're one of the few ways you can get tax-deferred appreciation. You're not taxed on the interest earnings until you take your money out. And if you've got an old annuity or an old universal life, old life policy, Matt can probably exchange it on a 1035 exchange, which puts your money into a better performing annuity or universal life product without paying any tax. Also, again, we're going into the Memorial Day weekend. Let's everyone remember the men and women who have fought for this country to preserve the freedoms that we're now throwing away. I feel that going to Arlington these days, walking the grounds, is mandatory for those of us who still believe in God and the United States of America and freedom and limited government. This government is out of control. Too many bureaucrats, too many in Washington, too much power in the hands of unelected officials who make rules according to their woke mentality. This is self-destructive. While Russia and China are on the ascendancy and are meaning to control the world and have nuclear weapons and will not hesitate to use them when the time comes. Last, people are saying I look younger again. My hair's gotten color back into it. I'm feeling good despite the fact that I'm now in my 70s and wanting to be continuous actively. And our other sponsor, My Vital C, which is this, I think, miracle molecule. I've written a book with Chris Burries, who is also the head of the co-founder of My Vital C. This is a supplement. It comes in olive oil or coconut oil, avocado oil, and the molecule has longevity principles, has energy principles. Please try it. I think you're going to like it. It also has a version for cats and dogs, and our pets love it. I think you're going to find that this is going to help you feel better and feel younger and have more energy if you'll just give it a try. The people I've introduced to it take it daily, as do I, and swear by it, as do I. So please give our sponsors a look. We also introduced Eric Smith and his decision technology yesterday. And this is a remarkable tool which helps you rank and score mutual funds on a truthful basis. Just click the yellow bars there and you can get more information from Eric. But you can see whether or not your advisor put good mutual funds or EFTs into your retirement savings or not. And this is going to be a huge market. When we introduce this tool, I think it's going to revolutionize the ERISA market, which is the retirement savings market. I've had securities and insurance licenses since the mid-'80s. I've created 2 broker-dealers, and I've worked with banks extensively, creating annuities and mutual fund programs for them to market to their retail customers. These are areas I'm very familiar with. Please take a look at our sponsors. Enjoy the Memorial Day holiday. Any last comments, Chris, before we sign off?
Again, as you said, remember those who served, fought, and died for our country. That's what Memorial Day is all about. I actually missed when I was younger. I used to march for the Middletown City Band. We'd do 2 or 3 parades per day, and every local area would have something, and they staggered the time, so it was kind of nice.
I remembered it. I did it as a kid. I loved it, and that's largely gone from America today. Instead, we have rainbow parades.
Exactly.
Okay. God, in the end, God always wins. And God and his moral law will win here again. The anarchy that we're experiencing comes from this essentially abandonment of the idea that there's objective reality or objective truth or values that are enduring for all human beings as rules by which we should and ought to live. If we don't follow these rules, we get anarchy, chaos, war, destruction, depression. And we're going to go through a very difficult time. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Friday, May 26, 2023. We'll be back after Memorial Day. We will not be broadcasting on Memorial Day, but we will be back next Tuesday. Thank you for joining us at thetruthcentral.com. Please like us, support us, look at our sponsors, and we'll continue to bring you podcasts every weekday. God bless. Thank you for joining us.